Imagine waking up tomorrow, right, and suddenly realizing that every single rule you follow, what you consider good or polite or even successful, was actually written by someone who secretly resented you.
Wow. Yeah, that is a deeply unsettling thought experiment.
It really is. But, I mean, that is the exact uncomfortable reality that Friedrich Nietzsche just drops in our laps today.
Right.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring his most famous and definitely most misunderstood text, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Absolutely misunderstood, yeah.
Yeah. And our mission today isn't just to, recite a philosophy lesson. We really want to extract the underlying mechanics of how we actually break out of society's prepackaged morals, like the actual process of building your own value system from scratch.
And to get to that process, I mean, we really first have to look at the psychological state of the main character, Zarathustra. Because he doesn't just start out with this grand plan.
No, not at all.
Right. He actually abandons humanity entirely. He retreats up into the mountains and he spends 10 solid years in total isolation.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, deciding you need a whole decade away from every single other human voice just to figure out what you actually think.
Yeah.
It just shows how incredibly loud society's influence really is.
Exactly. It takes him that long just to quiet all that external noise. But eventually, the solitude actually works.
Right.
He fills up with so much internal insight that he feels basically compelled to share it. The text actually describes him as a bee that has gathered too much honey.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, he realizes wisdom isn't really meant to be hoarded on a mountaintop forever. He has to bring this realization back down to the rest of the world.
Right, so he begins his descent, but he realizes almost instantly that, well, the world he left behind is not the world he's returning to.
Not at all.
Because before he even reaches civilization, he encounters this old saint in the forest. And this guy's living in complete devotion to religion, praying and singing.
Right.
And seeing this old man prompts Zarathustra to think the most famous line of the entire book, which is, God is dead.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that Nietzsche wasn't making like a theological declaration about a literal being passing away in the sky.
That's the big misconception.
Exactly. He was making a really stark sociological observation about the foundation of Western civilization. For centuries, a religious framework was basically the load-bearing wall of society.
The ultimate anchor.
Yes. It dictated objective truth, morality, purpose, all of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we think of society as this massive, intricate ship,
Right.
Religion was the anchor keeping us in place.
Right.
But with the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, the dawn of modernity,
Uh,
people quietly severed the anchor line. We're still floating together out of pure cultural habit, but we're essentially drifting. That secure foundation is just gone.
And the old saint in the forest, he just hasn't noticed that the anchor is gone yet.
Right, he's totally oblivious.
He is. He's still living comfortably in a structure that, to the modern mind, is fundamentally compromised. And Zarathustra sees this and just recognizes that he can't have a meaningful conversation with someone who refuses to look at the damage.
He just walks away.
Exactly, because the real crisis isn't the saint. The real crisis is what happens to the people who do see that the anchor is gone.
Because if you accept that those old objective rules are gone,
Yeah.
you're just left staring into a void. I mean, you have to figure out how to keep from sinking all on your own.
Which forces a massive evolutionary leap. You cannot just stand paralyzed on a drifting ship.
Right.
So Zarathustra tries to explain this urgency to a crowd he finds gathered in a town square. They're all, they're looking up at a tightrope walker performing between two towers.
Which is such a great visual.
It is. And he points to the performer as the perfect metaphor for our current state.
He basically tells them, look, humanity is not the final destination. We are just a bridge. We're literally a rope stretched over a terrifying abyss,
Right.
caught right between our base, unthinking animal instincts on the starting platform, and this new ideal on the far side, which he calls the Ubermensch, or the overman.
And that is a term that carries an immense amount of historical baggage, often completely distorted, sadly.
Yeah, we definitely need to clarify that. It's not some biological superiority thing or a comic book hero with super strength.
Exactly. In the actual mechanics of Nietzsche's philosophy, the Ubermensch is the psychological ideal of a person who no longer needs to be handed a moral blueprint.
Right.
They create their own meaning and their own values entirely from within themselves.
But, looking at an empty lot and being told, hey, go design your own moral universe. That's paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
It is infinitely easier to just buy a prefabricated house. Just do what society says.
Because total freedom requires total accountability.
Yeah.
If you design your own life and it fails, there is no devil to blame. There's no cosmic plan to fall back on to make you feel better. It rests entirely on your shoulders.
And the crowd's reaction to Zarathustra proves just how much human beings dread that kind of accountability.
Right. They don't applaud him.
No, they laugh. They mock the very idea of the Ubermensch because they desperately want to remain what Nietzsche calls the last man.
The last man, yes.
Yeah, last man is the person who looks at the tightrope, looks down at the abyss, and basically says, no thanks. I'll just sit right here on the starting platform where it's safe.
They want guaranteed security.
Exactly. Zero friction, zero risk, and a very shallow, comfortable kind of happiness. No great passions, just existing.
Because the last man prioritizes preservation over growth every single time. But, while they are mocking Zarathustra, the reality of the tightrope becomes completely literal.
Right. The drama actually unfolds.
A jester runs out onto the rope, mocking the performer, causing this massive distraction, and the tightrope walker loses his footing, falls into the abyss, and literally hits the ground right in front of the crowd.
And the crowd just scatters. Total sheer terror.
But Zarathustra doesn't run. He kneels down, and he comforts the dying performer. And he tells this man that his life had profound value specifically because he made danger his vocation.
Exactly. It's better to plummet into the abyss while actively trying to cross to something greater than to just huddle on that safe platform forever as the last man.
But that tragic fall really forces Zarathustra to realize a hard truth about his whole approach, doesn't it?
It does. He realizes you cannot just shout this philosophy at a collective crowd. The masses will always, always default to safety.
Right.
So the journey across that rope has to be an intensely personal, individual process. So he shifts his focus from the crowds to the actual mechanics of how a single willing mind evolves.
And he outlines these 3 very specific stages of psychological transformation, the stages required to cross that rope.
Right.
The camel, the lion, and the child. Okay, let's unpack this. It's basically like leveling up in a psychological video game, right? You can't skip a level. It's a complete teardown and rebuild of human consciousness. Starting with the camel, right? The camel. This is the beast of burden. It gets down on its knees, and it actively invites society to load it up with heavy moral weights.
Thou shalt do this. Thou shalt not do that.
Exactly. You carry the traditions, you endure the discipline, and you really learn how to suffer without breaking.
So it's a completely necessary phase. I mean, you have to inhabit the existing structure and understand its weight before you can ever genuinely critique it. You're building endurance.
Yes.
But if you just stay a camel forever, well, you're nothing more than a pack animal your entire life.
You become defined entirely by the baggage you carry for other people.
Right.
To move forward, the mind has to travel into isolation and transform into a lion.
The rebel.
Exactly. The lion's function is pure negation. It is the ferocious rejection of those old rules. The lion looks at the great dragon of society, a dragon whose scales are literally covered in the words, "Thou shalt," and the lion roars back, "I will."
See, I totally understand the appeal of the lion. It feels incredibly powerful to finally just say, to rebel.
It does.
But a lion is still just a predator, right? It tears things apart. If you stop there, you're just this angry rebel standing in the rubble of the house you just demolished.
Right.
How does mere destruction actually get us to a new set of values?
Well, it doesn't. And that is exactly the trap of perpetual rebellion. Tearing down a corrupt structure does not automatically magically generate a healthy one.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that is precisely why the lion must undergo one final, completely counterintuitive transformation. It has to turn into a child.
Which sounds like a massive regression when you first hear it. I mean, you go from the fierce king of the jungle to a toddler.
Right, but it's not about reverting to immaturity. It's about achieving the state of a blank slate.
Okay.
A child doesn't operate out of resentment for the past. A child plays. And play is the ultimate act of spontaneous creation.
Wow, play.
Yeah. The child has the innocence and the imaginative power to draft a completely new blueprint on that empty lot, totally unburdened by whatever building used to stand there.
But pushing through those transformations, enduring the crushing weight as the camel, finding the rage to destroy it as the lion, and then summoning the vulnerability to start over as the child, that requires a colossal amount of psychological fuel.
Absolutely.
And Zarathustra retreats back to the mountains to define this internal engine, and he calls it the will to power. Now, I have to be honest here. Will to power sounds incredibly menacing.
It really does.
It sounds like, a justification for just stepping on whoever happens to be in your way to get what you want.
And that's the common misreading. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of his philosophy, we see that political dominance or bullying is just a very shallow misunderstanding of the concept.
Right.
True power in this framework isn't about ruling your neighbor. It is the relentless drive for self-mastery.
Self-mastery.
Yes, it is the energy required to conquer your own lethargy, your own cowardice, and all those comfortable lies you tell yourself.
So the conquest is entirely internal. It's the absolute refusal to remain stagnant.
Exactly. And that internal conquest is agonizing. True growth inherently involves pain.
Oh, definitely.
But society has developed an entire moral framework designed to avoid pain at all costs. And this brings us to the mechanics of his most controversial critique, what he calls slave morality.
Yeah, this is the part that genuinely stunned me when I read the source material. He claims that our traditional ideas of good and evil are essentially a psychological trap.
Right. Let's look at how that trap supposedly functions historically, according to this theory.
Okay.
So, historically, the strong, the ambitious, and the exceptional naturally dominated. And the weaker masses couldn't defeat them physically or politically.
So what did they do?
They fought back psychologically. They inverted the entire value system.
They changed the rules of the game so that losing was suddenly considered winning.
Precisely. They convinced the strong that their natural vitality and ambition were evil and sinful, and they labeled their own traits, meekness, absolute obedience, the suppression of desire as the highest moral good. It was a genius act of psychological warfare fueled by deep resentment. It was designed to make the exceptional feel guilty for their own potential.
That is just, it dramatically changes the way you look at a concept like pity, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we are conditioned from birth to view pity as this great virtue. But Zarathustra argues that when you pity someone, you are subtly insulting them.
You are.
You're cementing their status as a victim and stripping away their agency. You're essentially saying, look at you, you're broken, let me feel bad for you, instead of challenging them to actually rise.
Right.
It feels really harsh, like getting hit with a bucket of ice water.
Well, he isn't trying to be soothing. He really wants to shock the system into recognizing how these hidden resentments shape our everyday behavior.
Right.
But, the unavoidable side effect of waking up to this reality is a profound sense of isolation.
Yeah, because once you see the rules as a rigged game, you literally can't unsee it.
Thanks.
And you certainly can't relate to the people around you who are still passionately defending those rigged rules. And that loneliness really starts to eat at Zarathustra.
It does.
He meets this soothsayer who preaches a philosophy of total emptiness, basically arguing that nothing matters and nothing ever will. And it just sinks Zarathustra into a really deep depression.
He falls into this feverish state, right? And he has a terrifying dream.
Yeah.
He dreams he is locked in an immense, silent castle filled with glass coffins. And the castle represents the oppressive weight of all these dead societal values that humanity just refuses to let go.
It's just a morbid, heavy image.
Right.
But then the dream turns. A massive wind blows through the castle and rips one of the glass coffins open.
Right.
And instead of a scream or something terrifying, what comes out of the coffin is laughter. Thousands of children's voices laughing.
It is the psychological breakthrough he desperately needed. The laughter represents the realization that even in the graveyard of old ideals, new life and lightness are still totally possible. The laughter shatters the paralyzing grip of that soothsayer's nihilism.
It completely snaps Zarathustra out of his despair. I mean, he literally dances. He realizes you can't just be this grim, perpetually serious warrior of self-improvement.
Yeah.
You have to embrace the joy and the lightness of existence, too.
Exactly.
Which prepares him for the absolute heaviest concept in this entire philosophy.
Oh, yes. The eternal recurrence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the ultimate psychological test. I want you, the listener, right now, to just imagine this. Imagine the life you are living today. Every single triumph, every moment of excruciating embarrassment, the physical pain you've endured, the boring commutes, the profound losses, everything.
Everything.
Imagine a demon comes to you in the night and tells you that you will have to live this exact life in this exact sequence over and over again for infinite eternity. Not a single thing changed.
Would you fall to your knees and curse the demon? Or would you say, this is divine?
Right. The mechanism of this thought experiment is just brilliant.
It really is, because it strips away any hope of a better afterlife.
Yeah.
It totally removes the comfort of saying, well, eventually it will all be over. It forces you to look intensely at your current reality and measure its actual worth.
And the pressure of that idea is so immense that when Zarathustra first fully comprehends it, he physically collapses. He passes out.
Yeah.
Because if there are parts of your life that you would dread repeating infinitely, then you are fundamentally rejecting your own existence. You aren't living up to your potential.
Exactly. To pass the test of the eternal recurrence, you have to achieve what is called amor fati.
Amor fati.
Yes, the absolute love of your fate. You have to look at the ugliest, most painful parts of your history and realize they were essential ingredients to creating the strength you have right now.
You must say an enthusiastic yes to all of it, the good and the bad.
You have to.
And when he finally wakes up from this realization, his vision is sharper. He retreats to his cave to wait for individuals who might actually be capable of this kind of brutal self-reflection.
Right.
And eventually, he hears a cry of distress echoing in the mountains. He goes out and finds this incredibly strange collection of characters wandering around. He calls them the higher men.
And these higher men, they are individuals who have realized that society's foundation is cracked.
They see it.
Yes, they've stepped off the safe platform of the last man, but they haven't actually made it across the tightrope yet.
The variety of characters here is just fascinating to me. He meets two kings who literally walked away from their thrones because they realized political power without inner mastery is just hollow.
Right.
He meets a man lying in a swamp, obsessively studying the brain of a leech just to understand his own internal parasites, like the false beliefs draining his energy.
Yeah.
He meets a magician who turns pain into drama. And the last pope, who is wandering around, completely adrift because the god he served is gone.
And perhaps the most complex figure of all of them is the ugliest man.
Oh, yeah.
This character represents the unbearable nature of absolute pity. He actually tells Zarathustra that he killed God in his own mind because he could not stand the idea of an all-knowing deity constantly looking down at his flaws with pity.
So he just destroyed the external judge.
He did. But the problem with the ugliest man, and really all of these higher men, is that they stopped after the destruction phase.
They're stuck as lions.
Exactly. They tore down the old structure, but they lack the creative power of the child to build something new. They are crippled by the void they created.
Yet Zarathustra invites them all back to his cave anyway. He throws a feast. He tries to show them the lightness, the laughter we talked about earlier.
Right.
But then he steps out of the cave for a few moments, and when he returns, he witnesses something utterly absurd.
Oh, this part is amazing.
These great rebellious thinkers who abandoned their thrones and killed God are all on their knees worshiping a donkey.
A literal donkey. And this raises such an important question about human psychology. Why, after fighting so hard for freedom, would they immediately bow to a beast of burden?
Because it's easier.
Exactly. The donkey incident reveals the deeply ingrained biological and cultural instinct to submit.
Wow.
The psychological weight of standing entirely alone is exhausting. When fatigue sets in, the human mind will desperately search for an external authority to hand the responsibility back to, even if that authority is a donkey.
It's just the gravitational pull of the camel stage. They just want someone to tell them what to do again.
Right.
But the wild thing is, instead of raging at them, Zarathustra kind of accepts it. He sees that human evolution isn't a straight line. It's incredibly messy. People stumble forward, panic, retreat, and try again.
He embraces the entirety of the struggle. He leads them in what he calls the drunken song, basically cementing the idea that you cannot separate the joy of living from the agony of failing.
They are permanently woven together.
They are. If you want to experience the absolute peak of joy, you must fully embrace the deepest valleys of sorrow.
Which perfectly brings us to the morning after the feast. Zarathustra steps out of his cave, and a lion approaches him. But it's a gentle lion, surrounded by a flock of doves.
And that imagery signifies the end of a cycle. The aggressive, destructive phase of the lion has finally been pacified.
The anger is gone.
Right. The conditions are finally set for the arrival of the child, the blank slate. Zarathustra realizes his period of waiting is over, and he sets out, ready to fully engage with the world on his own newly created terms.
So what does this all mean for us, the people not living in a mountain cave?
Right.
The echoes of this philosophy go far beyond Nietzsche. Our source materials point out how the poet and philosopher Allama Iqbal built heavily on this concept with his idea of kuti.
Cootie, yes, the intense cultivation of the self.
Exactly. The idea that you must strengthen your inner core so fiercely and elevate your self-awareness to such a peak that you begin to dictate your own destiny rather than waiting for it to be handed to you. The sources use the metaphor of a falcon that builds its nest on the harshest mountain peaks, completely refusing to descend to the comfortable ground below.
And the ultimate takeaway here is that true freedom isn't a state of rest. It isn't a destination where you finally unpack your bags and say, I've arrived.
Right, it's not a finish line.
No, it is the active, perpetual process of overcoming yourself. It requires continually tearing down the comforting delusions of your present state so you can build a stronger version of yourself tomorrow.
It really is a continuous loop of destruction and creation within your own mind. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a lingering question directly inspired by this brutal logic.
Okay.
If perfection isn't a destination, but rather this endless requirement to outgrow yourself, at what point does who you are become completely detached from who you were?
Hmm.
Can you ever truly know your core self if your primary duty is to constantly destroy it? I want you to think about that the next time you find yourself defaulting to the rules someone else wrote for you.